Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone around the world. I am Paul Sisler, and this is In the Moment. Today, we are going to discuss creativity and mental health. Now, before I bring in our host of the Vellum and all that, I'm going to share with people the APA Crisis Hotline resources. Um, the APA has a list of all these different helplines that you can call. Um, and it also has a list of psychologists near you that you may be able to help. That maybe you may be able to call and get some help if you're in need of it. I just wanted to let everybody know that T-Paw and I, we are not doctors, we are not psychologists or psychiatrists or anything like that. What we are talking about today comes mainly from our perspective on ourselves and others that we know that have mental health issues and how writing has helped us. And we're going to kind of talk about some of the other um, um, segments that I also do in relation to spirituality and stoicism. So, with that, T Paul, hello, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, I am doing pretty decent overall. Uh, a little still sleep-eyed because I thought the show started a little later, but hey, I'm here, and no, it's great because we've been away for a while we were dealing with real life, and I was kind of just going with the flow and not sure exactly when we'd be starting again. But then you're like, I got to work on some stuff, and I'm like, all right, cool. And then while you were working on stuff, it was almost like life, like operated like poetry, like a mirror, because then I had stuff I had to work on. So we were kind of paralleling each other there and having to work on some stuff. And the wife kept being like, I'm scheduling my appointment so you could do the podcast. And I'm like, the podcast is on a break right now. And so then she was just like, oh. And I'm like, and she's like, wait, so this entire time it's been on break? And I'm like, yeah, I told you that twice already. And she's just so involved with her mind and with everything she's been dealing with, which is part of the topic of the show, that because she's been seeing a therapist and a physical therapist like twice a month, thereabouts. And Lindsay was trying to do it every week, but in order to try to cooperate with the schedule and the elasticity of it, she had to work around that. And so that's kind of what I've been up to the last few months, aside from, you know, writing a little bit here and there, but more, I've actually been producing an audiobook, and which takes a lot of time.
Yes, yes, yes. And during that hiatus, I finished writing my new book, The Rainbow Prophecy, Book One, Blood Schism. And I'm still in the editing process. I'm finishing that up. I've talked to my agent, and I'm going to get that submitted probably by October 1st. So probably in about a week and a half here. I'm very, very close to having it done. It's an excellent piece of work, but it kind of goes in line with what we're talking about today with mental health issues and all that. So, yeah, let's.
Yeah,
You got a nice flow chart here for us to follow and all that, or outline. So let's get to it.
yeah. So basically, it's the synergy of mental health and the art of creation, which I like how you changed it to just simply creativity and mental health. And I'm like going, because I had to title something else that was like convoluted, but basically, it's writing and storytelling, crafting in the face of mental health. When life spirals around you and your own mind is hard to find peace, how do you carry forward? How do you build perseverance? I have seen it as a constant topic on Twitter, and then I've also just seen it in general, like in any of my media apps or just people I know in person. Like I can't say, count how many times that someone has been like, gave me the nickname therapist, and I'm like, I'm not certified. And actually, and they just go, well, I still want to talk to you anyway about my problems, and it's because like somehow mental health became a hyperfixation for me, and I think it was because of my own messed up issues. And so, naturally I gravitate towards it, and naturally try to learn about it. But basically, one of the things I want to also talk about is even the diversity is yourself, even if you're in your own way. And it happens a lot where like a lot of us are so driven to get to the finish line, so driven to, fix all of our issues that we end up becoming in our own way. And it's very important when it comes to writing because what we don't realize as writers is that, and a lot of times we don't even think about it, and I'm one of those people, is that you can get in your own way and you can be so focused on the goal that you create blocks, which are what a lot of people call writer blocks, and or just creativity blocks, because you don't have to be a writer to have it. You can be producer, musician, anything that do with art, which is what the focus is, because you could have it in any other area of your life. But basically, it's building a foundation. Like, uh, what I like most about In the Moment right now is that you have Paul's podcast on stoicism, which also helps control the emotions, which is part of what leads to the blocks. But also it is his Lee Two Hawks, and then my brain
Shadow
is forgetting
Fox.
the other name. Shadow Fox. There you go. Where it talks about synergy of spirituality. It talks about synergy of the mind. And those two podcasts are extremely useful for people out there who have issues with all of that. I was one of those people that, because dealing with loss, dealing with trauma, dealing with stress of life, it all adds up really quickly. And one of the things I want to talk about with this podcast is talking about how it's fine to have absence of spirituality, like if you're an atheist or you're someone who is open to spirituality but not quite sure what you think of it. We're not here to talk about religion or whatever. It's more just the idea of like being able to create zenness in your soul and your mind, and then being able to address that. Because when we talk about mental health, we're talking about people who mental health has become such a pet name in media, become such a pet name in general when it comes to how to try and woo people to vote for you or other things like that. If you're actually going to tackle it, then that article he showed at the beginning of the podcast is actually a good idea of how to tackle it, because then you can learn things about what's creating vexation. And one of my favorite people in media right now is Russell Brand, and he's an ex addict, he's a recovery addict. And one of the things he talked about was you never fully, like, you're never not an addict, because you'll always find your mind will be finding something to find a new fix on and become dependent on. So you're a recovery addict is actually a lot better connotation, because it means positive. It means you're on the mend still. It means that even if you have a really bad day, which is fine, you're allowed to have that. Even if you have a really bad day, you will end up in a place where you'll be like, I need to still be better. I need to still be healing. And so you're recovering, and let yourself recover. Re- Allow yourself the luxury of that, because it is actually a massive gift to be able to be healing, to be able to stay there, because a lot of people fall off, and then it affects your writing, and it affects your ability to create characters who are real, characters who live in a world. And a lot of times we either use our fiction to mirror the world around us, or we just simply create another version of it that we think is better. And there's a bit of that bias and projection, which is fun too, because you're a storyteller. But basically, it'll help you gain angle and drive. What I mean by angle is your perspective will shift, your lens will shift. And Paul, like, you've been dealing with your own stuff
Yes.
this year, especially since January, that one time. And I know that that's been living up there still. And you're using your stoicism, you're using your other resources to help get you through that. But what is your thoughts on this?
Well, you brought up. I'm going to take it back to where you said writer's block. Um,
Hmm.
I want to amend that to living block. Okay,
Fair.
because as we're living, we encounter things, and when we become overwhelmed, we have things that disrupt how we're doing things. And as a writer, we call that writer's block, where we just can't get focused and we can't move forward. Um, in life, we have that where we get so overwhelmed by everything, and things become so convoluted with paying the bills, getting the kids to school, doing this, doing that, that we get a living block where we can't focus on anything. And sometimes we need other things to distract us so we can get back into focus. As a anything in relation to like mental health when you're being as an example and all that. I've gone, like you said, I've gone through a lot of things. A year and a half ago, my wife passed away from cancer, and I was in a very, very dark place. And a friend of mine told me to go back to writing poetry, and I did that. And it got my mind off of the things that were bringing me down and got me back to a place to where I could start to focus again. Well, let's say you're not a writer, you're not someone that does poetry or keeps a journal or is writing a book. Maybe you might want to, if you have these issues going on, get out of get out a notepad or something and just start writing, or get on your computer. Um, it doesn't matter if you're trying to publish anything or not. The fact that you're utilizing it as a tool, writing can be a tool, whether it's poetry or you start writing a book or you're writing about yourself. And it doesn't have to be writing, it can be art, it can be anything. It can be go out and buy yourself a punching bag if that's going to
Yeah,
be your change of purview to allow you to distract yourself to regain focus and get your mind off the things that are bogging you down, that are preventing you from concentrating. So the association why we bring it into the world of writing is because one, this is a writing segment, and two, us as writers, quite frankly, most of your people that are artistic in this world, whether it is art, music, writing, or whatever it is, we are people that um, usually go through hard times, and that's why we go into some type of creative art form. You know,
yeah,
helps us. I mean, trust me, it helps us. And like when we develop a character or something, the anger that I have, I can put that into a character. I can have that
yep,
character lash out the way I want to lash out, and yet I'm not lashing out, but my character is. So, and you'll see
exactly.
that in my writing. But you can also put out those other feelings that you have, and how you want to see the world, how you want to see that perfection, how you want to see everybody love each other. You know, so it's a great tool. I want you to utilize that thought process as writing being a tool, because quite frankly, whether it's writing, painting, music, or whatever it is also a tool, and that tool produces some great things. So I think it's very important for people to find something to focus on outside of everything else that's going on in their lives, that they can utilize for themselves, that it can be something that's theirs. It gives them that empowerment. So yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I really liked what you said. Part of there was talking about outlets, talking about ways of getting through it. Methodology. And you know what one of mine is? I go to the gym. I go to the gym and I work out. And whether it's and we always alternate too, because Tim, my brother, has issues as well. Like he goes by Carnage on the internet, Carnage 6778. And when we're at the gym and stuff, we alternate between center app and then just a regular regiment, because he's got enough knowledge to be his own coach or be someone's coach. And for the last like 3 years, he's been my coach. But he's been teaching me a lot of stuff, and we like lately that it is, and sometimes he jokes around and says, "Oh well, I learned so much so that if like one of the machines is taken, I can just alternate it because it's working a different part of the muscle to get us the same area." And so like there was times where like we'll be needing to use the flat bench press, right? And the thing is called the reverse one, or the decline. Yeah, decline. It's where like instead of you laying like flat like this, you're down further at an angle, which also increases the amount of weight you're pushing up. So we'll use a slightly reduced amount of rate than we would have done with a flat bed or flat bench press, but then we increase the reps. So the reason why I bring that up is because with my mind, it's weight, and you're carrying so much. Hope you're doing okay there, pal. Bless you.
I'm good. I'm good.
Um, but like basically, when you're carrying weight, like responsibility with kids, chores around the house, bills, like there's like a giant list of things stack up. And I'm a troubleshooter or a doer. I get up and I'm like, okay, I got to go do something. I have to literally be told by people to take a break. Usually, like my current boss Scott is like, "You need to take a break, Thomas," and I'm like, "I'm fine, I'm good." And he's like, "No, remember to take your breaks." Every single month they have like an allotted amount of breaks, right? I usually end up giving below the break usage average, like because they were like giving me crap about how I was over my break. So I was like, okay, I'll just use less than what they're telling me I have left, and then that way I still have more. And then I'll forget to take the whole thing by the end of the month, and then Scott's like, "So you were 15 minutes under last month. Don't do that again." And then I'm like, "It's gonna end up happening," and he's like, "Don't do that." And I'm like, "He's like, you're supposed to take your breaks, and with how bad everybody's mental health has been, you need to take a break." And I'm like, "But why?" But anyway, so like, uh, whenever I'm around the house or when I'm doing the writing projects, because a lot of times I have to work at night when the kids are asleep. Because when I've been producing the audiobook, for instance, that means that I'm working in an office like I am right now, where all the outside sounds of the outside world always come in because this room's not insulated, unfortunately. And so, uh, with that being said, when it comes to what we're talking about with like mental health and you're dealing with your trauma and then you're getting through it and I'm dealing with mine and things like that, and yet we're all kind of trying to like work around our stuff while still being productive, while still remaining happy. Like at the end of the podcast, you'll end up talking about, making choices, making things come your way, being happy, that sort of thing. And that is something that's hard to attain. That is something that's hard to keep consistent. I love that you say that because it puts that in your mind as you're leaving the podcast, but it is hard to attain that for a lot of people. Like it really is because it's you're searching for dopamine when you're on the internet. And when I'm at the gym, I'm holding weights, right? But when I go home, in fact, my buddy Alan called it out and was like, "You need to drop your weights." And I'm like, "Huh?" And he's like, "The amount of weight you're carrying around, you need to drop it." I'm like, "But why?" And he's like, "Because it's too heavy for you." And I'm like, "No, it's not. Flex." And he's just like, "Oh no, you need to drop your weight." And he's like, because he was trying to explain to me how to help me out, right? Like with stress and everything. And I'm like, he's like trying to figure out a way to explain. And then once he brought up weights, I was like, wait, gym talk. Yeah, I'm listening now. You're speaking my language. And he's like, drop 10, 20 pounds. And I'm like, but I like to do more reps. He's like, no, you need to drop 10 to 20 pounds so you can gain more of that muscle endurance you're talking about having for your mind. And that's how he's translated. Is it's like you got bills that you're paying, drop like 80% of that weight that you're trying to focus on. Focus on the small stuff, get that killed first. That way you're doing less weight with more reps. And I'm like, but okay, fine, I'll try and do that. And he's like, now I'm getting to you. And I'm like, you were getting me before. He's like, no, it wasn't clicking the same. He's like, you think like someone who's a gym hound. Anyway, was there any comments?
No, we don't have any comments yet. Um,
Okay,
I'm gonna utilize weights to make you think about something here because you bring
all
in a
right,
good perspective on this. If I go out and I bench, say, 200 pounds, and I get one, two, maybe three of those reps in there, I'm going to get bulk muscle. Okay. Bulk muscle is great for show, but not for strength.
that is true.
Okay. Whereas if you are doing 100 pounds 10 times and you do 10 reps of that, okay, which means you've lifted it 100 times, that muscle is going to become more dense and it's going to be
Hmm.
stronger. So if you're just trying to focus on your appearance, that's self serving. But now,
Yes,
if you're going to focus on the density of that muscle to increase your strength, that's serving self. Now, I know you've heard me talk about self serving and serving self. It's
it's
something
even
that
in my
I
notes.
learned about Shadowfox from Shadowfox, and it's very, very important. And it's something that I've always done. I just never termed it like that. And when Shadowfox gave me that enlightenment, it's something that I now focus on and I try even harder to do. Because If you're self-serving, then all you're doing is trying to do things to, give yourself appeasement, versus if you're serving self and you're making yourself better and stronger, you can now serve the greater good of everybody and everything around you. Now,
Yep.
whether you want to utilize that in spirituality, you want to utilize that in stoicism, or you just simply want to utilize it for everyday life. You have a family, you have a wife, you have kids, you have a home, you have a job. And if you are serving yourself and making yourself a better person, now you can serve all of those other things even better, because the first thing that we are is we are in service to others. Now,
Yep.
I know there's a lot of people that aren't going to like that. They're not going to like that thought process because I want, and I need, and I need, and I need. You go into that mindset and all that, you're going to be breaking yourself down and you're going to be harming yourself. So instead of
Yep.
doing
I agree
that
with that.
awesome weight, yeah, I'm tough. I can lift 200, 300 pounds. Yeah, well, guess what? I can do 100 pounds 100 times. So you did 300 3 times for 900 pounds. I did 100 times for 10,000 pounds. Who's the stronger?
That's funny because that's what Carter says all the time. Like he'll be like, yeah, you lifted 365 or 400 pounds at least once or twice. You maxed out, whatever. You went full a hole. But you know what? I lifted 100 pounds, 400 times. Can you do that? Because he talks about all the time. He talks about reducing the amount of weight and then doing more reps. That way, you're able to build that resilience. You're able to build that perseverance that you're talking about.
Well, it
So it's
builds
it's a good idea.
endurance, it builds charisma, it builds a lot of things. And then the other thing that you want to look at, what look at this weight aspect in the aspect of your life. What
Hmm.
can you control and what can't you control? Because if
Exactly.
you're putting energy out on things you cannot control, you're weakening yourself. Versus if you handle the things that you have control over, you're getting that done. So, in essence, you're actually exerting less energy, which means you're retaining more
Exactly.
energy mentally and physically. And again, we're about mental health. So, when you're looking at like writing, if you're sitting there and you're walking around and you're pacing and your mind is just working overtime, how am I going to do this? How am I going to pay this bill? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? There's nothing I can do about it right now. I got to wait until this is done, or I got to wait until that is done. But what can I do now? You're putting all this extra burden on yourself versus,
Hmm.
okay, what can I do now? I can do this, this, and this. What can I do to take my mind off of those other things? Get out a book, start writing. Get out a canvas, start painting. Turn on some music, listen to some music, or get out a keyboard or an instrument if you have it and start playing them. I don't care if you're good or not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you enjoy it, do it. Go out and work a garden. If you have a garden, go out and work a garden. If you don't have a garden, but you've always wanted to start one, go out and do it. Go out and do it. It'll occupy your mind. It puts you in another place. And that is good for your mental health.
Yeah. Yesterday, the wife we went to the storage unit and got her ukulele out, right? And she's like, "Oh, I want to learn it." And I figured that she's gonna touch it that night, but like part of me was like, she's gonna wait like a week, like she always does. But then like the other part of my brain was like, no, she'll touch it. And then like within like 20 minutes, she had the ukulele in her hand, and she had found some apps to play some songs, and then she was spending like an hour just messing around with the ukulele. Yeah, she got stressed out because the kids were being loud, but she was able to play with it. You should see the amount of zen that was on her face. It was
Yep.
great.
Yep. We have revolutionary thinking that says when you concentrate on what you can't control, you automatically lose. And in that moment, you're absolutely correct. You do. Because if you can't control it and you're wasting that energy, you're wasting energy. You're losing energy.
Yep.
Yeah, you lose. You lose.
Yeah, no, I agree with that statement because like I'm someone that has massive control issues. and I'm like not talking about like creatively because like I've loosened up a lot on that aspect. I mean, you probably have never seen my control issues because of the fact that I have been able to keep such a tap on it. But like I have massive control issues, and a lot of it stems from the loss of my mother. A lot of it stems from the loss of my dog Aries, which this one is ironically propped on. And a lot of it's stemmed from trauma, and I've had to do a lot of work because my a lot of my anger stemmed from it too. It was like, being angry that I can't control everything, being angry that I can't just fix everything. There was a lot of stuff that stemmed there. And when you focus so much on something that is not controlled by you whatsoever, that you think you can somehow change it, like it's nice to have that dose of arrogance. It's nice to have that dose of hubris. It's nice to have that hero complex, so to speak. But you're not going to fix anything. You're just going to make it spiral and get worse. And then you're going to end up having it cause tension to the other parts of your life that you never expected to even touch. Because you'd be like, well, that's not has nothing to do with that. How would that even touch it? And it's like because you are touching it. So therefore, you are causing it to spiral. And so you have to step back and be like, what can I control? What can I actually you know, affect positively? Like stuff that's directly within my line of, not within line of sight, but stuff that's directly within the realm of possibility of being able to affect positive control over. Because that's one of the things I always focus on is how do I spin it into a positivity? How do I, cause it to flip? How do I go from being like, oh, I'm grumpily about this thing. Okay, well, how do we turn it positive? How do we look at it in a more positive light? Because everything can be like just about like there are some things that are it's still hard to look at it like our losses and stuff, but there's a way of being able to kind of try to turn it positive, especially with how we handle it, but also with how we view it. And even some of our losses can be done like that, but it's hard to do that. And so one of the things that I wanted to also talk about was how this leads to everything we've talked about in the past with characterization, world building, plotting. Remember when we talked about weights? How we talked about things that we're holding? How about if somebody who has issues with that, how about if we work on one thing at a time? One of the things that I worked on with when I reviewed my one story is I knew how to build a character. I knew that that wasn't an issue. I knew that plot building sort of just happens when you're creating situations for characters to act in. So I worked on world building, worked on figuring out what their culture was, figuring out their abilities, that sort of thing, and that also leads into the hero's journey that we talked about too, because that's part of story writing. But how does it relate to mental health as well? Well, it relates to how the character's mental health is. It relates to how your mental health mirrors and works in parallel to theirs because you are the storyteller. So naturally, you're going to end up creating situations that not only identify with your own situation, but also work in symbiosis with made up ones. Because no matter what you think, you're subconsciously going to end up putting that into your writing. And you should, because it's your life and you write what you can speak to. That's one of the things that part of what led me to this topic in general was the fact that I mean, since forever ago, I've been writing about mental health in subtext with my writing because like every one of my characters deals with a version of that. But especially recently, now that the wife's been seeing a therapist, and every time I tell her something, she'll go to the therapist, and the therapist will be like, "Has Thomas or T-Paul ever thought about becoming a therapist?" And I'm like, "No, I mean a couple times now that people keep mentioning it," and like and she constantly says that, but she's also certified. She can speak to it herself in her own perspective, that sort of thing, which is nice because that means that like I don't have to like make it to where I practically trying to override what Lindsay's saying. I don't at all, but it dances in cohesion because like when she says something, I'll be like, and if it's anything I didn't say or someone missed, I'd be like, wait a minute, let me see it from her perspective. Okay, that's what the wife's dealing with. Okay, let's go ahead and work in conjunction. That way, like, there's no overriding. That way, I'm not thinking I'm knowing more or something. Because there are people out there that will think that they'll be like, well, I know a lot about it, so I should know about it too. I'm like, she's a therapist. If you guys are conflicting on something or you guys have a different opinion, that's fine. But if like there's something that she's seeing that you're not seeing because it like knowledge blocks or something else is going on, look into it if you're really that concerned. And so How does that relate to writing? Well, the reason why it relates to writing is because it
Hold on.
relates to everything else.
Before you go on with
Sorry, go
that,
ahead.
that's all right. I'll let you continue in a minute. I got a message and all that from somebody that's watching on our Twitter app,
Oh
Jackie,
yeah.
and she said she can't comment, and maybe others can't too. Um,
Oh.
for some reason on Twitter, it doesn't allow comments until after the video is done, and then you can comment on the feed from the video. But while the video is on, if you connect on the live, you can actually get into the chat, not the comment section, but there's actually a chat that's on the Twitter live. So if you go
Yeah,
into the
live chat.
Right. So if you go onto the Twitter live and you should be able to type something in the chat. So if you type it in there, I have it going alongside of me right here. So if you tap something, because I've seen a lot of people that have joined, so if you type something into the chat, I should be able to, if I catch it, I'll read it. Otherwise, the only two things that I have that bring up chat or in the comments on the show are through YouTube and through Twitch. So to be able to actually make a comment, you would have to log into YouTube or Twitch. And for some reason and all that, since Periscope went down, Twitter doesn't come up on here for comments, and I don't know why. I've tried to figure it out myself. It just it I can't figure out how to do it. And if somebody knows something that I don't on how I can connect that up, please let me know. I'll do it. I'll get it to where we can do that. But right now, the only two destinations that I can utilize on here for comments is Twitch and YouTube. And then otherwise, if you're on Twitter Live, if you write something in the chat and I catch it, I can read it out loud on here. So, and there is a delay on Twitter versus what I'm doing right here, about a 3 to 4 second delay. So, if you put something in there, I might be able to help it out. So there we go. Go back to what you were saying. I just wanted to interject that. Thank you, Jackie, for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Jackie's the like she's like the or they is the unsung hero of this podcast right now because like I didn't even know that was happening. Like I was like, oh, that's why I asked you before. I was like, is there any comments? And you're like, no, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess carry on.
Ah,
And so like,
hold on. Hold on. Twitter is making you subscribe to comment on live. Ariel,
oh,
is that also in relation to the chat that's on there? You have to be subscribed to utilize the chat.
yeah,
I'll,
because I
if he
this is
responds,
like
I'll,
new to me.
I'll put it up and all that if he responds.
Yeah,
I
no worries.
know this, and it could be something that Elon's done. Who knows? But anyways, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, T-Paul. Continue.
Oh yeah, no, you're good. Basically, talking about how so many things, but like basically, the idea is that um being able to address your own mental health, even if it's like small and minor, which is actually glorious because there's a lot of other people that don't have that. Which is funny because like it's almost hard to gauge mental health, because like the amygdala registers pain, so you really can't measure trauma. You really shouldn't. You should just be like, "This is mine," and then you address it, and then you help each other. So I'm not like trying to measure anything, because that's like a lot of the internet is about dick measuring, and I don't like that myself. Like I look at my wife who every time she has a stressor, like her brain goes into shutdown, and so a lot of times it's me playing cheerleader, and a lot of times it's me playing grounder. Like I will grab her arm while we're driving, for instance, and then ground her, or I will hug her during the middle of the day when the kids are trying to be pains, especially on the weekends when I work. And I will have to like be her grounder and be her cheerleader essentially. And which is nice because it allows you to give you an opportunity to support. Can be stressful, especially if like I'm in the middle of like a million things at once and she's starting to lose it. So I can speak to it. I can speak to the whole concept of mental health. I can speak to dealing with it in the perspective of being a spouse, but I can also speak to it with myself. And it's part of why it's such a fascination, I think. But like you yourself, I've talked to you personally, and you talked to me about stuff that you don't put on the air, and I'm glad to be able to help you with those things in some way. like minor or big, and that's part of why I figured I was like, hey, wait a minute, this is a good topic to talk about because Paul could even speak to it and can understand it himself from his perspective. And it relates to writing because, like, even in your own story, I don't even know if you've really noticed it at all, but it's still a theme in your own story because it has to do with the characters that are living their lives. And that's what, we're talking about all along is writing too. And mental health is something that is such an underwritten chord that we have now finally as a people started to bring it more to the surface. But when I was a kid and teenager, it was not a focus ever. Like, yeah, you could see a program at the school about it. Yeah, you occasionally would have, somebody talk about going to a therapist or someone having an appointment with somebody and everything like that. But it was such a buried thing that when someone says you should go see a therapist, it was taken in such a negative context. It was not taken in a positive one.
Right, right.
For
We have Diana Bishop who says for poets, it helps express. For fiction writers, it helps to process. And for nonfiction, it gives testimony of survival. Yes, there's a lot of truth to that. As
Paul knows
somebody
that last part.
who writes poetry, has written a nonfiction and is published, and is writing and has just finished a fiction book and is about to be published. Yes, yes, absolutely. You nailed that,
I was
Diane.
gonna say, I was gonna say, Paul knows that one firsthand. All three of them. Like I know it from a second perspective through you or through other people, but I've never written nonfiction. I thought about it recently. Like I was like writing out this thing right here, and I'm like, should I write about this like in nonfiction? But then I'm like, that I have to do a lot of research at that point. But like you can speak to that, and you can speak to the poetry aspect. I can speak to the poetry aspect and the fiction, but you can speak to all three of those things.
Yes. Well, and let me give you an example and all that. I already mentioned how when my wife passed away, my good friend Torch the Poet told me to start going back to my poetry, and I wrote a poem. And I'm not going to read it right now because I'll lose it and I won't be able to regain my composure. So, because
You're good,
it still makes me cry when I read it, and I'm getting almost starting to tear up now just even thinking about it. But
Paul. You see
it,
this? You see this?
yes, yes. But it brings you back to a reality and it allows you to really express how you feel. And whenever I go into the flow, Shadow Fox in my segment on here, I'm always just like it's emotional for me. And then Shadow Fox and Diana, they do the journey within usually after the flow, and they also have one on Saturday. And whenever I go in there, I'm always inspired and I'm always writing poetry and I'm always reading my poetry and the journey within. Um, and I've been in a lot of other spaces. I've been in mental health spaces. I was in a men's mental health space, and we were talking about toxicity and the male mentality and how that's a mental health issue that men need to discuss. And I ended up writing a poem about that masculine toxicity. So yes, it helps you express things, and then for fiction, it helps you process things because a lot of the anger that I have in the world today, I put it into my book. A lot of the frustration, a lot of the anxiety. Yes, it helps you process that. And in the nonfiction book that I wrote, um, there's a lot of research when it comes to nonfiction, and it requires a lot of focus. So whatever else is going on in the world, when you're writing that nonfiction book, that's where you're at. You're in focusing on all of that, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of things go away for you momentarily. Same thing when you're writing your fiction book. You envelop yourself into that world of creativity. Now you're creating something. You're creating characters. You're creating a storyline. You're world building. You're creating a setting and a plot and all of this other stuff that you put into it. And in your mind, it flows like a movie, and you're processing that. So you are in this world that's not the world you're currently living and breathing in. You're in this whole other world, and it's an escape. The good aspect about this, it's better than any drug out there.
Yes, it is.
Okay? And I tell you this from experience. I have been clean and sober since April 3rd, 1993. I was an alcoholic and I was a drug addict. Yes. I used to go through a ton of alcohol, vodka, loved that vodka, cocaine, loved my cocaine. And if it was a pill, I didn't care what it was. I was swallowing it. Okay.
You're like, I need dopamine.
And I tell you, when I finally woke up and got out of that, that was brutal. I never want to relive that detox
That
process again. Okay. It is brutal. But I am glad I went through it. I will never go back to it. Ever.
that's good.
Ever. Okay. But with that, I have come to find a lot of other things in life that mean a lot more to me. I am an atheist, but I'm also spiritual. I'm a spiritual atheist. I know a lot of people think that's an oxymoron. I don't believe in a creator of all things, but I do believe that there is more out there and there's an energy out there. And that's what I talk about when I'm on the flow with Shadow Fox and Lee Two Hawks, because I feel that energy and it is something that's real. And for me, it helps me. Okay. And there's a lot of good life lessons that come with that. Stoicism, to lead a virtuous life through stoicism, courage, justice, wisdom, courage, justice, wisdom, brain fart there. Um, those are the four cardinal
Your brain hit a buffer. Your brain was like,
those, those are the four cardinal virtues of stoicism. Okay. And when you live in that, and you just you do that and you're able to keep your emotions in check. And a lot of people, they think that stoics are emotionless people that just only think logically. That's the furthest from the truth. Your stoics are very emotional. That's why they need stoicism, to help them keep their emotions in check, so that when we
yep,
are angry, we don't lash out in anger. When we are frustrated, we don't lash out in frustration. And when we love, we don't lash out overtly in love. We're able to hold that back and deem it appropriate on how we utilize it and think logically in the process, so that we don't misinterpret, misunderstand, or cause harm to somebody else. So
yes,
all of these tools, stoicism, spirituality, creativity, they're all hand in hand. They all run together, you know. And if you prefer one over the other, you can find something that you can take from it and utilize it in your everyday life that makes your everyday life better. Then hey, keep doing it. Keep doing it.
yeah, exactly. And that's actually taps onto the next part I want to talk about, which is utilizing even the negative. Basically, I right now I live in a place where there's a source of energy, as Shadow Fox would put it. There's a source of energy that is in this house that is utterly negative, and that source likes to attack me, or at least direct itself at me. I like to try and word it as a survivor. But if the environment is filled with negativity, filled with poison that tries to infiltrate your mind, you can put up a shield of stoicism that helps you defend against these darker forces of nature. Whether it's family, because it can be, friends, or people that you believe you can trust, people that you love and care about. And even after you face those things, you end up being like, well, I still want to keep my ties with them because I still love them. Then go ahead and do that. Just learn the art of emotional control. That way you're not doing all the things that Paul talked about with lashing out, with, you know, losing your mind, with all those things. And objects to introduce, because objects can be a visual stimulation, but they can also be a sensory stimulation. And they introduce and try to reinforce the destruction of creativity or deconstruction of creativity. So basically, what that means is that when you're going through your day to day and you're dealing with triggers, you're dealing with things that are happening throughout your day, even if it's like events and not just, physical or interactions on the internet, that sort of thing. Learn how to pull back and learn how to do breathing techniques. Like, even if it's like 5 seconds or 10 seconds. There's a lot of people like Kevin Smith, for instance, who went to therapy in the last year. And on his podcast, you'll literally hear him be like, let me get in the present real quick. Cause like he often is either in the past or the future too much. And he does the whole, 4x4 where he takes 4 seconds or 5 seconds and he does it 4 or 5 times. And then he puts them in the present. But basically, it's nurturing your senses to healing again. It's you finding a way of getting a semblance of peace through self-imposed suffering, self-imposed punishment, and using it to do hobbies, habits that help reinforce imagery and nurturing your senses to healing. And it's key to remember to avoid self-sabotaging and self-avoidance. One of my youngest siblings recently keeps telling me that they're prone to self-avoidance, aka anytime anything happens in their life, they'll avoid it, even if it's positive. And it's their whole avoidance thing. Life's the same way. And with them being introverts, it's easy to just avoid. But you can write about this too in your own fiction work, using it to establish dynamics with characters and world building. Basically, using it to tackle stuff that's in your own head that will allow you to put that in your fiction that allows you to heal and put distance. You're like, I gave it to this character, so now I don't have to use it right now. And it's a way of being like, I'm not using that self avoidance because now they have it, or I'm not using self destruction because now I've given it to that character, or I'm not having control issues because now they have it, or something like that. And that way you're essentially trauma sharing, or essentially stress sharing, or de-stressing, or using it as a way of stress control. But but also hating one's own writing helps attribute to self sabotage. I don't know if a lot of writers think about that, but when you're hating your own writing, you're not learning. You're just simply hating something you wrote. It's your voice. It's your outlet. It's you speaking. So acknowledgement of the negative while stirring it to the positive, which is what I talked about, which probably made no sense at the beginning, helps prevent self sabotaging your own work and your own life. It's being able to address those things that you're dealing with, no matter what they are, because it doesn't have to be my issues. It doesn't have to be Paul or Paul's. It could easily be anybody else. Like it could be anything, and addressing it and figuring out a way around it is weaving around the chaos, as I call it, or weaving around the way of life, and being able to find a way to work your way through it, and find a way to work your way to self peace and symbiosis of the mind and creativity, which is part of this episode series right now. It's talking about the idea of aligning the chakra and the chi. Cornelia would love that one, and talking about figuring out how to create self-imposed peace versus self-imposed exile. Because if you're avoiding, even if you're actively participating in your life, let's say you're going to a birthday party, right? And you're actively surrounded by 50 people, you can still avoid. You can still be self-avoided because you're literally moving yourself away from everybody, or you are mentally checking out and zoning out, and therefore you're avoiding what's going on, and you're still doing avoiding. You can still do that. And it's even more easier to do it when you're in bed with somebody and they're talking to you, or they're using their phone or something, and you're like talking to them, trying to communicate with them, or they're trying to communicate with you, and you're doing the phone thing where you're like, oh, I'm listening, but you're really scrolling. I'm listening, but you're really not paying attention. And you're doing the avoidance thing. Like, not everybody is doing that, but that could be a thing. And so it's me talking about finding a way to utilize that for the positive. Like for me, like when people are talking to me, like when my buddy Alan's talking to me, for instance, he'll be talking to me for like 30 minutes, right? Be venting and yelling and blah, 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 because he just has no emotional control. I'm trying to help him with it. But like, he'll be doing that and he'll be like, you're on your phone the whole time. You're not even listening to me. And I'll be like, yeah, I am. And they'll be like, well, what have I been talking about? And I literally just repeat the highlights. So I don't need to say everything verbatim. If I repeat the highlights of what he told me, then I'm like, and then I think that you could do this, this, and this. He's like, holy crap, how'd you do that? And then like, it's called being able to utilize, being able to read, once multitasking, because I have ADHD, but one of the things about ADHD is that you tend to either check out or zone out and then not listen because you're hyper fixated on something, but you also tend to do other things as well. And so I'm able to somehow find a way to redirect that. Paul, what are your thoughts on that giant nutshell?
Avoidance. Diana says avoiding just puts things on the back burner where it has an opportunity to boil over. A lot of truth
Yep.
on that. But now you got to remember, not if you're going to avoid something, you got to remember to turn the burner off. You don't want it to boil over. So if there's an actual aspect of avoidance in your life, instead of again lashing out, this is where the four cardinal virtues come in. That's going to come into wisdom. It's going to come into temperance. It's going to come into justice and courage. Um, Instead of putting it on the back burner, how about you put it up on a shelf? It may cover a little dust. You may get a little dust covered, but you can always go back up and bring it back down and get back into it later. Address it later. If
Right.
you have no control over the situation, then save it for a little bit later. Wait until there is control. Wait until something can be done. Um, I want to address since we don't have chat and all that. Jackie and I have been on here on messages and all that, and she told me it's hard to keep up and all that. She's typing and as we're talking about things and all that. She
Yeah.
loved the topic that we were talking about 30 minutes earlier, where people bring characters to life that are actually living out the author's feelings and life experiences as a way to process. She says that it's very healthy and a way to process one's feelings. Yes, it is. It is. And I'm just going to go through this real quick and all that, just to
You're
bring
good.
things back up and everything. Um, my characters that I have my stoic characters, I have my spiritual characters, and I bring the energy from both of those aspects into my writing. And I also point out the anger and the frustration and stuff like that, and how we deal with it. So I actually utilize the lessons that I learned through stoicism and spirituality to write my book, and bring those characters to life utilizing those aspects of stoicism and spirituality. So again, it it's helped me a lot because it's one of the ways I want to see the world, and it motivates me to be a part of that in the real world, to express myself in those ways to help other people reach those aspects within themselves. Um,
Hell yeah.
Energetic frequencies can be approached in multiple ways. Feeling the energies on a scientific approach, logical process, etc. Shadow Fox and Diana Space Journey Within are a great teaching tool. Yes, they are. And she says, I respect them and their perspectives and the way they share them. And as do I. Oh my God, Diana and Shadow Fox, two of the greatest human beings in this world. You definitely need to check them out on the flow and the journey within. And there's a couple other things that she wrote and all that. There are healthy ways to approach life, many ways to do so. Listening to people talk like this space can help us hear different perspectives and utilizing the ones that work. And there's a key. There's a key. Jackie, I love you because this is one of the most important aspects in what T-Paul and I are talking about right now, utilizing the ones that work.
Yep.
I can give you all the ideas in the world. I can tell everybody, yes, just write poetry. Well, that may not work for you. That may not work for you. And if writing poetry doesn't work for you, then don't write poetry. If being spiritual doesn't work for you, then don't be spiritual. If being a stoic doesn't work for you, then don't be a stoic. Whatever it is that works for you and it
Yeah,
brings
if
you
you
to a
notice.
better state of mental health, then
Yep.
utilize it. And I can guarantee you, drugs do not bring you to a better state of mental health. Smoking a little weed, that's going to help. Okay. Let me rephrase this. So, all right, I don't want you to think that all drugs are bad. Okay. Some will help you in moderation. Weed will help you refocus where your mind goes. Okay. But in excess, weed could make you into a lazy person. Uh, yes, yes. Weed could distract you more than you need to be distracted. Okay. But if you're someone that, hey, I just need to kick back and vegetate, weed is a great thing. Some people having a glass of wine after dinner and relaxing by that fire. Yeah, that could be great for the mental. But now, if you're going through a box of wine a day, trust me, there's a problem. Okay.
Yeah.
So you need to really, oh, Diana. Hello, Jameson. I hear you talking through Paul right now. Really? Your name is Jameson? Why? Oh my. You sure it's not Alistair? Anyways, that's an inside joke between me and Diana and all that in relation to my book, The Rainbow Prophecy. Um, Whatever works for you that allows you to be a better human being for self, that's the most important thing. Self. Because
you,
if you can't love yourself, you can't love another person. If you don't like yourself, you're not going to like another person. And if you're not taking care of yourself in good ways, you can't take care of other people in good ways.
yeah, one of the key things about this entire episode, really, that I haven't noticed the way I've phrased things is I've tried to phrase them in an open way, where it's whatever it is that works for you, do that. Because I've mentioned ways that people can do it. I've mentioned ways that it's not dictating. It's not telling you this is how you're supposed to do it. No, it's this is a series of ways that I personally have learned, that I have absorbed, that I have watched Paul, Shadow Fox, other people, Diana, really wonderful people use to help them deal with their mechanisms. Develop coping mechanisms, develop a way of healing, develop a way of carrying forward. And it's me taking those examples as well as others to try to formulate, a decent beginning for this era of the show and figure out a way to address what is pretty much an epidemic. We've got. Uh, I actually had a buddy recently share with me. We'll see who they are, but I've had them share with me that uh, they actually had to talk to the suicide hotline, and that they were like the reason why they didn't carry through was because they were too afraid to do it. And a lot of people out there will attack that and say, "Well, you should just do it if you're going to do it." It's like, no, that's not how you address it, because that is something that my wife has dealt with herself. Is that she has fear of creating her own end. She's afraid of the pain, and there are ways of doing without pain, but we're not going to address that. The point is to carry on. The point is to help you heal. That way that way we're like at least reducing the epidemic severely. And we're not therapists, we're not psychotherapists, we're not certified legally in any shape or way, so we're not going to pretend that we're anything like that. We're just simply people who care, people who are concerned, and I'm, extremely fascinated by the concept and wanting to address it because it's part of writing, it's part of creating, it's part of the mind, it's part of the spirit, it's part of who we are as people. And when you got people fighting politically on either side over smaller nuanced parts of this topic, whether it's any of the topics that you could find on the political spectrum, doesn't matter what it is, it's going to affect mental health. And especially depending on the ones that are popular, the ones people love to fight about. Like, it's extremely popular with, attacking mental health because people that are your closest friends, people that are your closest loved ones that don't want to open up to you or don't want to talk to you about it because they watched how you interacted with that topic. And then they feel like they feel less safe. And for instance, my little brother Nico, they're trans and they're a massive uh, advocate for mental health, partially because they are part of it. And they recently tried to commit suicide this year, and they almost succeeded. And I'm surrounded by it. No matter where I turn, I'm surrounded by it. And whether the people are like aren't being open about it, or whether they are, uh, that's something I've had to address in the last 6 months alone. Is convincing my youngest sibling to visit the ER because they bruised themselves riding a scooter, and they would much rather just let it happen because then it's they don't have to deal with it and they can avoid it. They can do avoidance. And so I had to pull Dean Winchester and convince Sammy Winchester to go to the ER. Is how my brain thought of it. Is I'm like, you got to carry through. Like I spent like a good hour just pulling. Like my voice went there. My voice went to that deep dark baritone of like, you're gonna do this, Nico. Like you got to carry through. You got to carry on, and like that sort of thing. And so sounds funny and whimsical now, but it wasn't at the time. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this episode. Was it's a very important thing to address, not only for those around us, but us, the people that have to sit there at our desk or sit wherever we're sitting and be like, "Oh God, now I gotta now that's popping up again." Intrusive thought, or you look in the mirror and like something's off when you look at the mirror. It's just something that I needed to address this for this first episode
Yes.
is how to tackle it, because I want to be able to help people with developing coping mechanisms. Like stoicism has become one of mine. When you have somebody that's like lashing out and yelling all the time, and you know you're glad that anytime you've been on air that people haven't heard it, um, and they're dealing with their own stuff, but yet they're projecting onto you. Stoicism becomes a good shield, and when you're dealing with other things, like with your loved ones, like your spouse or whatever, uh, these coping mechanisms they help. And so like I'm not telling you to have them, but they are a good idea to look into if it's something that interests you or something that seems like it'd be feasible. And that's why when I liked how Paul said that before, I started going on my little monologue here. That if it doesn't work for you, then don't use it. We're not forcing you to do anything. If it does work for you, then double down and or at least look into it, because then that way it'll help you with creating. It'll help you with your everyday life.
Exactly, exactly. Diana said, "Teapot, take a deep breath. I tuned in to clear any negative energy around you." I just want people to know that mental health is very, very serious. It truly is. And I myself, I was in an accident in 2011. Pain, pain causes mental health problems. I know because I'm living proof of it. I have been suicidal since 2011. I'm still suicidal. I won't commit suicide because I have things that I want to live for, but that doesn't stop the thoughts from coming into my head. Okay? Doesn't stop the thoughts from coming into my head. And people need to understand that people that go into this mental state of a thought process, it's hard to get that to leave you. Okay. And with everything that I've gone through, and I'm still in pain, and I still wake up every morning with just thoughts of not wanting to be here. And it's I have to get up. I have to get moving. I have to look at my little pup who gives me joy and wakes me up and, starts the brightening of my day. And then I have this like coming on here. I have this to look forward to. I have a lot of people in my life right now that I communicate with. Stoicism helps keep me strong. Spirituality helps keep me strong. People like Diana and Shadow Fox and T Paw, Jackie, who's been here in my messages and all that because she can't comment on here. Um, one perspective can change one's entire view of life. It can be very beautiful. Absolutely, Jackie.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Hell yeah.
um, someone might be on the brink of seeing no way out of a situation, and in one moment, it can change. There is help out there, and the right people can help. Yes, Jackie. Absolutely. Absolutely. And whether it's at apa.org, where you call and you talk to somebody that can help you, whether it's a friend, whether it's somebody that you hear in a space. Um, all of this can be life changing for people. For me, it was Torch the Poet. I was in a very dark place. Torch the Poet. I love you, brother. Thank you. You mean everything to me. Um, life deals everybody crap somewhere along the.
Hmm.
And I wish Bryce was in here because he'd be throwing some stoic things in for Marcus. Okay. Um, the aspect of what we're talking about is, and it's what Jackie just reiterated and all that. There are people out there that can help. There are people that you can talk to. But I want to put one more tone on this before we call it a day because we're at the over the hour mark here. As a person that when you hear somebody else coming to you and they're wanting to talk about things, just remember where you've been at in life, whether you've been gifted with really a really good way or if you've lived through horrors and stuff like that, that other people out there also have issues. And when
Hmm.
someone's reaching out to you, don't be an ass. All right.
Yep.
Don't be an ass to them because they might be crying for help. And you might be that one person that they're entrusting in. And they may be a friend, they may be somebody you don't know. It could be a stranger walking up to you on the street, just needing somebody, anybody to hear them. Take that moment, take that moment of time and show a little love, show a little empathy, and just listen. Step into the position of observer and
Yep.
listen because you might find something out about somebody and you might be able to help them. Maybe just listening is all they needed. Maybe you might be, spirit may have guided that person to you for some reason. Fate, whatever it is you believe in, whatever it is you may not believe in, you might then believe in. Who knows? Just be kind, you know, be kind. That's about the most important thing I can put out there. Be kind because when people are hurting, that little bit of kindness can go a long ways. Any
Oh, it
close?
can. It can be a game. It can be a game changer. Being as someone who does get stressed out over it, but it ends up shelving that stress because again, I'm expert at over handling my own stress. I hold too much weight a lot, but I do it because I can, and like even if like I'm like practically going, but by the end of it, I'll not even mention it to the people I'm helping because it's not about me in that moment. It's about them, and it's about listening to them. It's about being open. Like you be kind, as Paul is talking about. You listen because everyone has a story. You just have to shut up and listen, and you can help them as long as you like kind of know it 'cause a lot of people like me do know it. A lot of people like you do know it. They can speak to it. But even if you don't know anything about it, even if you're like not an expert, still listen because you can give an uninformed opinion and say, "I'm not an expert. I don't know this topic very well, but I'm wanting to help you." And that way, it tells them that they trusted the right person. And the reason why I say that is because they trusted the right person who will actually care and will actually help, even if they're not an expert. Like you because that non-expert can direct them to an expert or can help them find it. You're like I don't know I don't know the answer to this question, but let's go find somebody who does, or let's go find the
Yep,
answer. Let's work
exactly.
together. Let's work towards a solution. And that way you're actionable. That way you're running to the conflict and not away from it. That way you're not using your own avoidance issues, or you're not letting your own stuff get in the way, and you're being you're self-serving versus serving self. You're helping others, and you're probably able to learn something yourself about something that you didn't know you had. And even if you don't, you'll learn something that might help somebody else. It's one of the things I like about some of the people I surround myself with is it's full of people who not only are always open to learning, but they're also open to changing for the positive and
Yep.
helping other people. And when you do that, you end up learning all this stuff, and it's able to also keep you humble, but also keep you open to understanding. And that's why like it's important to be open. Like I'm not preaching here. I'm just a guy who's telling you some stuff that I hyperfixate on and that I am obsessed with sometimes and fascinated with and love to handle. And even if it's uncomfortable, because sometimes mental health is extremely uncomfortable. And it's about being able to be open to that. Let it bleed. Let it bleed. Let it flow well. Bleed well. And then heal. Like
Yep.
healing is pain. Let's be straight up about this. Healing is pain. Healing is suffering, but it's getting through that suffering that matters. It's finding that way forward that matters. I am somebody who's medically died before. I'm somebody who's been in a perspective where I was like, "What the hell is all this around me?" And it turns out it was all just energy. And then the wife brought me back. And then I spent like a good couple of years wondering why the hell that happened. Like, why did I get brought back? Because I was still married to the trauma. I was still married to the pain. I was still married to everything that was bad. And so it's about finding a way forward. It's about healing. And those are my closing thoughts, really. And it still relates to writing because it's still about finding that way forward.
Yes. All right. All right. I got a couple more comments to read. Jackie says, and you might never know how you help that one person. You never know what internal battle is facing that day. And I agree, genuine kindness is so powerful and can't be underestimated. Absolutely. And then Diana says, love you all. And then
Let me see,
my
Diana.
my closing thought is, and I'm probably gonna brutalize this. Benny will probably chew me out later, but xenoacidium. We have one mouth, we have two ears, so maybe we should be listening more than we say. And again, I probably brutalized that quote, but we should be listening more than we say. Two ears, one mouth. And with that said, remember everyone, be kind, be happy, and make good things come your way. Thank you.